Hello everybody and welcome to another list video here at Playing Board Games. I'm joined by Daniel, who's down in the corner over here, and we are going to be talking about 3 deck building habits that we want to break. They can be mostly bad habits. I think that's how I framed it as. These are bad habits that we want to break, but maybe they were good for a time, but they're less good now. So it's just going looking at our deck building and say how we can improve it or change it. So we were just talking before, you had a hard time coming up with this one?
I had a hard time thinking about this because I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. All these, I'm a great deck builder. Like, what's wrong with what I do? I think that maybe it's not necessarily bad habits per se, but also ones that you need to, but they are habits to keep in mind while you're deck building, so you're not always doing the same thing when maybe there's reasons to change some of your habits. Like you're playing, I don't know, a different investigator that requires you to do some different things. But if you fall into some old habits, they don't work as well in the new deck that you've built. So keeping that in mind, I think, is also why I thought it was hard to come up with this, because it's like, well, what are the things that I've done that are wrong? Like, were they really bad? Or maybe not, it just didn't work out for some reason. And that's just also a thing when you talk about like improving, getting that consistency that we want. Every scenario is tough in this game, so maybe there's some improvements.
Yeah, for me, I mean, everyone watching, and you know as well, Daniel, that a big thing for my approach to content is always like trying to learn and always trying to just be like introspective of the choices you've made, the decks you've brought, all that stuff. So this is actually something I've been thinking of for a while. So 2 of these were pretty easy for me, and I think they're actually actively bad habits. And the other one was a little, I mean, I think it's like if I had to give myself a critique, if I was watching someone else build my decks, how I would, what I would say to me if I was somebody else. So should we dive in with your first one here?
For sure.
All right, your first one is
not upgrading weapons early enough. Okay, there's a little pattern, I think, with some of the ones I've talked about here, because often I would say that I'm just reacting to like the last 2 or 3 decks that I've built and really thinking about, oh gosh, that didn't work out well, or this was a sticking point. So on my channel, you and I both played Alice in Wonderland, and we had a little challenge involved. And one of the challenge was to spend all of our XP in these 3 customizable cards. And I really felt that because I didn't have XP to put into my weapons, that it kind of was a problem. I mean, not necessarily. I was playing Mark Harrigan, but it really felt weird running level 0 weapons the whole time. And it's not just weapons. It could be spells too if you're running mystics, but being a fighter is tough. You have to actually hit those attacks or evades, mostly attacks. And if you don't, there's a big problem. And getting your weapons to be +1, +2 on top of whatever you have as a base is really good. But it feels like a bad thing to do. You're like, I want to put other fun things in this deck. And that customizable challenge really was like, yeah, do the other fun thing. Admittedly, for the guns in my deck, the customizable card kind of helped with this a bit, but you still have to find another card. So it's nice to just slap down the one really good weapon and say, okay, I can fight things. And you've talked about this too with mystics, where the level 0 shriveling is like, it's not great, right? It kind of sucks. You kind of want your other things that boost your willpower out too, which feels like the same kind of problem here. So it feels really boring to be like, okay, I'm upgrading my level 0 Mauser to my level 2 Mauser, even though that card is a banger. But if you don't do that early enough, you really feel it.
Yes, yeah. And it's kind of funny because it's very dull to just upgrade your weapons, but it's usually what I try to upgrade first, just because, one, it's kind of like it makes me feel like I'm doing the fun stuff quicker, even though it's later, where, oh, my decks are done, now I can start just flipping through the binder and seeing what I want to get, right? But the other thing is, it's a little bit funny because if you upgrade your weapons, you actually get more VP in the long run because it's easier to kill things. You don't need to like stress so much to do all that. But I definitely agree. Like, it's like the things that I always upgrade first, and it's super dull, is gun and economy. I make those things better, and it's not until like scenario 4 that I'm starting to like see the new fun cards in my deck, and that can just be a little bit like unexciting, especially when, you know, the upgrading part is a lot of people's favorite part of playing Arkham, right?
Yep, it's kind of mine. So
Yeah.
anyway, that's my number one.
Nice.
3.
All right, mine is building for two-handed solo when I'm playing two-player. This is something that Eric and I, the video has come out on the channel? I think it has. Let me look at my schedule. Eric's video. Yes, it has. Perfect. So this is something that Eric and I actually talked about after we finished the Feast of Hemlock Vale. Eric was saying that while they're learning, they're not exactly feeling like they're able to fully understand what they should be doing at every given situation, right? Like, and when you think about it, Eric has played a lot of Arkham, but only like 8 campaigns, which at the time that Eric's been playing, I've played probably like, I played Dunwich like 3 times, I played Carcosa twice, right? So like, you start to like, when you start doing replays, you can start to like learn the things and get there. But then Eric and I, from that conversation, I started to talk about how I approached the decks here. And I felt like I was giving Eric too much to do, right? Like I was like putting too much on Eric's plate, being a little bit more like laid back and being like, it'll all work out. And then I took that conversation to try to be like, so what am I doing that's allowing this to happen? And I think that there was a long period in Arkham where I was playing two-handed solo like every week. I haven't played two-handed solo actually I'm mostly just playing it for Patreon now. But when you're playing two-handed solo, the deck building is different than when you're playing 2 players. And the reason for that is you are one brain and you know what you need to do. So, for example, I can say, I don't need to solve an enemy because this other deck that I've built can solve that enemy, right? Like, there's going to be no situation that I'm in where I am not able to solve a problem because I'm building 2 decks that go in tandem. But when you're playing 2-player, that changes, right? I can't just assume that the person I'm playing with can solve every problem that shows up that I am not building my deck to solve, right? So it's one of those things where then I need to determine, how can I help solve problems? How can I be a little bit more dependable on my own and not require my other player, which is usually me, to solve these problems that I'm not solving in my deck? Another example of this is, I've been noticing, when we've been playing, the Alice in Wonderland, I think, is a good example. But even in some other aspects, tempo is a little bit strange in our last few campaigns, right? I think that, like, in Forgotten Age, when we did our Blessed run, I think our tempo was good, right? But it wasn't really great. Like, I think we were both kind of a little bit slow. We were both playing like big setup decks, right?
Setup, yeah.
And we knew that once we got there, yeah, we would go like tempo positive like crazy. But then I look back at our Circle Undone curse decks, and those were like tempo crazy, right? But then I look at the Alessandro deck, and I actually feel like my tempo was really bad, right? A big part of that, I think, is like the Mark Harrigan problem, where you're like, why is fighting feeling so bad? It's because we're putting our upgrades into everything else. But I think another reason is when I'm playing two-handed, I'm still building... So when I'm playing 2-player, I'm still building with that two-handed tempo in mind, where my other deck might grab 2-player clues throughout the whole scenario, and then I'm like not filling in the gaps that those 2-player clues that are now missing. And I feel like that's carrying over into these new decks that I'm playing in 2-player.
Yeah, I think we've talked about this quite a bit recently amongst ourselves, and kind of a new spin on this is, do you feel like 3-player, which you're also very, very familiar with playing, is more like playing two-handed solo, in that you kind of assume that that missing piece is going to be picked up by someone?
Yes, yeah, I would definitely say so. And it's actually...
There's like, 2-player's tough. 2-player has that issue where if you don't solve it and the other person isn't set up for that, then that's it.
Yeah.
There's nothing else.
One
So
thing,
yeah,
one
I
thing
agree.
that's been getting me with three player, and it's also kind of related to this, and I think it's even, you could also make this slide here, building for two-handed solo when I'm playing three player. I'm actually even not even confident in my ability to get clues in three player anymore. If you look back at all
Mm.
the previous campaigns that Travis, Bryn, and I have played, I have been the fighter. And I want to say subconsciously it's because Travis gave me some sort of hypnotism to make it so Bryn doesn't bring sled dogs all the time, right? But I think it's just because I've feeling like I've in this last year of playing Arkham, I've cracked combat tempo, but in that time I've played so much combat that I've forgot how to get clues at higher player counts. So much to the point where like I'm even coming to like four-handed days during patron game days and I'm the clover and I'm like just looking at my clue tempo and I'm like something feels wrong, right? And I don't really know what it is, but I can fight like a motherfucker. I know how to do that.
Well, it's good because I feel the opposite lately.
Yeah.
I feel like my fighting has been like, well, we'll get there, I think, and then, we do eventually, but it
Yeah.
feels so stressful. And then clue getting just is like, yeah, I can pass tests. That's not a problem. We can get
Yeah.
there.
And it's kind of funny that this has happened because it's really kind of there's no reason why I should feel like I've lost the ability to get clues at a good rate, right? Maybe I
Mhm.
just need to get some confidence under me. Like that's why for Eric and I were playing Innsmouth, I'm playing Ursula, and I'm just gonna move. It's like literally one of the most boring Ursula decks in the world. It's just like move, get clue, like, and then play a card, right? Like that's gonna be like the whole game plan that I have going for it. And hopefully that puts some confidence back in me.
Yeah. Man, I don't know. This is a great point, though. I feel this too. I haven't played two-hand solo in a while either. I think we both have sort of felt like, hey, it's more fun not to play two-handed
Yeah,
solo.
yeah,
But we're so used to that idea that I can build two decks and I know what they're both capable of, and I can make decisions based on what is in someone else's hand too,
yeah.
right? You see all the information.
Yeah, and it's actually because like right now I'm doing a Lucius and Ursula run on no Lucius and Zoe on my
Mhm.
Patreon right now, and it's two-handed solo, and I have nothing but confidence. Like my Ursula, my Lucius deck is going crazy, my Zoe deck's going crazy, but you maybe build one of those decks in in two player, and I'm gonna wager it's gonna be it's gonna be Stranger, which I think as you said we've been talking about this, and I think we're unpacking a discovery for at least our Arkham play experience through all this, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, it's fun to discover that together. All
All
right.
right, let's go to your next one. All right, what do we got here?
So this is sort of related to the last one in that I felt like a bad habit that I have is putting a lot into a few cards and say, look, I'm building the deck around this interaction, but if I don't have that card out, one or two cards, like, the customizable ones, let's say, from the last run, or other things. Like, I've played a lot with the Red Clock recently, and man, that
Mm-hmm.
card feels really good when it's in play.
Mm-hmm.
And it just solves a lot of problems. And you're like, wow, I have my economy is solved. I can pass skill tests. I get to move around. I have extra actions. It's 10 XP. I mean, this is a huge card and huge investment. But the reality is, you kind of see every card with equal frequency in your deck. And the fact that you only have one copy means that, well, if you don't see it, what does the rest of your deck do to solve the problems that that one card did? Um, Unfortunately, I think my playstyle is I want to build around some fun stuff. So,
Yeah.
like, it's boring to spread out that XP over 5 cards. Um, but I just need to figure out a way to still not just be like, I guess I'm going to sit here and draw cards until I
Mm-hmm.
get the things that I need. And, the scenario will eventually be solved, maybe. In the meantime, I'm just going to bite my nails and hope that we actually get the thing. But it feels really bad when even if the card you want shows up, I don't know, let's say 60% of the way through a scenario, where it just doesn't have the impact that it would have if it happened at the beginning. And sometimes I feel like there's a line where it's like, and this would have been a great turn if only this card were in play. But I can't just summon cards out of the deck. And maybe that is the answer. Like, try to build a deck that really does grab things like backpack or whatever tutors you might have available to you. But I don't know. I don't want to run those cards all the time, too.
No, I think this is really interesting, and this is something that I on the PPG Discord I see a lot, where there's like certain gamers who like have these elaborate combos and they like end up crushing scenarios with these elaborate combos. But then I like have to remind myself that these players are usually like they're playing at 4 players all the time, right? And that gameplay loop that you mentioned, which is like I'm gonna just draw cards until I find my combo, that's possible in 4 players, right? Because the other players are gonna be able to usually pick up the slack that you're dropping. So then when you go tempo positive, it's like crazy, right? Like you just like go through it for that. But in 2-player and even 3-player, it's a bit harder to get there because there's less people to solve the problems that show up, right?
Yeah. And it's tough also because to learn the right lesson from these things, because if, I don't know, let's say 75% of your campaign, you actually do draw your key cards early. And then it seems like things are going great. Your deck is great. But it's so fun. And this is going to get to my third one. I'm not going to spoil it right now, but it's so funny because it's like, what do you do until you get there? What are the cards that are in your hand and in your deck doing without that key card in play already? It's like you're trying to build this machine and you need certain parts in play first to make the other cards useful. And that's the other half of this. This one is like needing 1 or 2 key cards in play to function. It means that the rest of your deck is sitting around waiting for that key piece first, because otherwise they don't do the thing. It's a combo piece, but it's also funny because those cards don't do anything on their own. And maybe some of the answer to this to solve the problem is you have to run more cards that could be useful even without the other cards. So
yeah. And actually, honestly, this is something I think that would have been good for this list as well for me, but I think it goes back to the first one where it's just like I've lost some confidence in some ways, and it's not being so reactive after a scenario, where I think this happened with you and I don't remember which campaign because they're all kind of like they're blurring together. This was a small thing, but like we finished a scenario and I was like, I need more X. No, it was York. It was the York one. Yeah. And I was like, we had so many resources. And I was like, I need something to spend these resources on. And then we never got there again, right? We never got that many resources. And like to not be so reactive, I think, is something that would be good as well for me to also focus on.
Yeah, I see this a lot with players who, a scenario in which we've found that enemies were tough. Immediately someone puts in a big weapon and then never needs it the rest of the campaign because either that scenario was just unusual or, something happened where things didn't work out, and this doesn't really solve that problem. What the problem wasn't with your deck, it was with a different deck, or a different aspect of the scenario could have gone very differently. And I don't know, like sometimes you just have to be like, whatever, that was just what happened today, and we'll move on and make sure that my strategy with the deck is still the same if you believe in it. I think that sometimes you look at the deck and say, I don't believe this is actually good anymore. I need something different.
Yeah. All right, let's go to my number 2 here, which is taking do as I say, not as I do too literally. So this also relates back to that conversation I had with Eric, and it reminded me of when we did a we were doing our deck retrospective after Dunwich, and I was teaching Eric all this time, like, you need to have a lot of weapons and you need to find those weapons, right? And then I was doing my deck retrospective with Mark, and I was like, here are my 3 guns. And Eric was like, don't you want more guns than this? And I'm like, this is a big do as I say, not as I do thing, because I trust the deck and my ability to maneuver and kill things because I have more kill spells and all that, right? To solve problems as they show up. So I really actually have like 8 weapons in my deck, but only 3 of them are assets, right? But I do think that recently I've become a bit too prone to just like hand waving this off and being like, I know it'll get there. And I think I need to add more contingency for in the situations when it doesn't get there. Because like, I don't think it's like falling behind, but as an example of this is just like, I mean, I know there was a little bit like against what was, it was just like the odds were so against us in that one. But when we played Depths of Yoth in our Blessed run, and I just was not able to kill that guy. Like, I think if there was just like more assurance, like for example, maybe I wanted to do something that I used to do back in the day where I would just bring in a one of you catastrophe in my survivor decks because the card is good and it's also just like good protection, as opposed to just being like, what's the game gonna do, right? Like, I'm gonna kill this guy eventually, right? I'm gonna like get ahead of it. But am I actually making the best choices, or have I fallen into a bad habit where I'm just like hand waving some threats away? I'm still never going to be scared of the Mythos deck because I don't think I've like died to it yet in a way that like caused the whole campaign to fall off the rails, right? But I think that when it comes to the choices and how I make up my deck's construction, I have become a little bit hand-wavy and just being like, it'll work out, when maybe I should ask, what can I do to ensure that this works out better?
Ooh, I don't know how much I have to say. In response to this, I totally agree that it's also easy for us as people who play the game a lot to try something new or different just because we're trying something else with our decks. I think people who play less often and aren't doing themed or challenge runs are going to do the thing that is the best more often, just because they don't need to try out something weird.
Yeah.
And I think often we are not using or taking our own advice because we need to make room for something else. And maybe we want to try a new card. So I agree. I mean, I'm sure I look back at some of my more recent fighter decks too, and they just don't have enough weapons. They just don't. And I'm like, well, I'll draw them. I'm not worried. So we'll figure out a way. And would it be less stressful? Would it be maybe less interesting for the gameplay if I did all that stuff? Yeah, I guess so. But it's also fun for us to learn more by stretching these pieces of advice to the limit and see, like, okay,
stress testing, what
actually does happen.
Yep. Yeah, I do agree with that as well. And I think that's like stress testing, I think, is very appropriate. Like, we should try something where we like run a campaign where, I mean, Brendan and I've kind of done this, right? Where you don't play assets, you kill things only through events. I was gonna say we've done that with events only, but it'd be fun to try to like can we win a campaign with no weapons in our deck? I've done a campaign where I never fought an enemy and I won the campaign, right? Like, that's the fun stress testing that you can do, but not everybody's doing that. But I think when it's just for fun and like we're just playing, I'm still kind of in that stress test mindset where I'm like, I'm like learning the wrong lessons from my stress testing.
I mean, even something like not running emergency cache. You guys have done that in your draft runs, right? Without the core set involved, you just don't have as much economy. So what does that do to the deck? Granted, there's other variables there too, but one of the things that you've talked about so much is the basis of your deck has to be economy. And if you just kind of leave that out because you can't take those cards, then it gets tough.
Yep.
It gets tough.
All right. Your number one, well, number three. There's numbers here, but they're kind of just here for fun. We have...
All right. Letting cards rot in hand for most of the game. This is sort of a funny one because I feel like I often run a lot of card draw, but then the cards in my hand aren't being used. They're sitting around waiting for the perfect moment, which is, I think, sometimes very important because then you have the things. But what I need to get better at is having a better idea of how likely that is. I've noticed this more in solo for whatever reason, and in 3 and 4 player. In 2 player, it doesn't happen as much, but it will happen. So one thing you might say is, well, what are the cards in there for? It could be from the last point I brought up where it's like you're waiting for the card to come out where it actually does something. Hidden Pocket, for example. It's in your hand. You want it to play it onto an asset to be able to play another asset because it's adding slots. But of course, if your clothing or armor item isn't in play, then what's it doing there? It's waiting.
Mm-hmm.
It's just waiting. And it feels really bad to be like, I guess I'll commit it to a test because who knows if that other card will show up. It's one icon, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
big deal. But then the card, you commit to a test, maybe you pass the test or something, and then you do draw the item and you're like, why did I get rid of it?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so one of the things that probably you and others would say is, okay, this is because you're not running enough skills, because you can always use the skills. And I have to say that it's partly that, but partly not. Some of the skills that I've run just sit in my hand too because I don't actually need them. I'm already up enough on a test, or I'm not taking that skill test often enough. And they're just sitting in my hand too, which sounds weird,
Mm-hmm.
but it does happen in kind of the same way. Instead, I would submit that maybe a bigger thing I need to include are more fast events,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
not hidden pocket. That's a bad example here. But
Yeah,
things that
like,
can always just be played,
yeah, yeah.
right? And if I'm running enough card draw, then the idea is that I'm using these cards to get some value, and then maybe I redraw them if we're to playing that kind of deck, or I'm not just discarding things to hand size. I'm able to use something most turns. So it's an interesting problem, but sometimes my deck gets to the point where I'm like, I draw a card, I'm like, wouldn't it be cool if this were working a hunch? Because then I could just play it, get a clue, and move on. And that sounds so strange because this is not a card I play that often, but I don't know. It's weird. It also is player count dependent, like I said before.
Yeah. I totally get what you're saying, though, and I think that this is a pretty good comparison is the idea of, at least from what you discussed here, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but it's kind of like the Phoenix Down in Final Fantasy, right? Where, or like the Mega Potion, where you're like, this could really help this fight right now, but I don't want to use it. So like that one of my favorite things about Arkham is the fact that every card can be used, except for skills, can be used two ways, right? You can play them or you can commit them. So like if in for Final Fantasy, like I could use Phoenix Down to like I don't know, like gain, like I guess you could sell it, but to gain money, it's just like, yeah, I would just use it for like that other mode. And I used to do this. I used to let cards rot. But then recently I've just started to like go to a test and I'm like, yeah, I'll just throw this on here. Sure, I spent 3 experience on it, but I'm not playing it, so I'm just gonna like put it into this test, right? And then it's still like serving a purpose. And I think it can be very hard for people to quote unquote throw away things that they put experience for. But I think that comes from playing a lot of Arkham, where it's just like, I know I'll see this card in the next scenario and maybe it'll work. Or that's my way of learning, oh, I shouldn't have put this card in my deck if I keep committing it to skill tests as opposed to playing it, right? I like your idea of more fast events that are just like always usable. Or like I imagine that's a big reason why you like Plucky as well, right? Because a fast asset that you can just play costs nothing, and it's never going to rot in your hand, and it always gets the job done, right? And it doesn't feel like it's game breaking in the way that like other assets are, you know? It's just like one of those things where it's just like, I never have to see it and it gets the job done, but it doesn't feel like it gets the job done while giving me like 8 clues or dealing 10 damage in the process, right?
Yeah.
But I think that's very interesting because there's like some sentiment that I agree with and I disagree with, where it's like, if you end the scenario with like 12 resources, there's a problem, right? If you end the scenario with 8 cards in your hand, there's a problem, right? You're not using those resources, right? You're not using the cards in your hand. You're not using the resources in your resource pool. What can you do to change that? But I think it really comes down to player count, because when I play Two-Handed Solo, for example, I'll end with like 14 resources because at a certain point, all I'm doing is taking basic actions. Like I'm just grinding the game to dust, right? I don't need other stuff, right? Or like I'm using the assets that I've played. So like everything else is just it's like my protection. It's how I protect myself. But are those cards rotting in my hand, or has my gameplay shifted where they're no longer necessary for winning the game, and I've realized that? And can I make those cards more necessary to the game plan? I think this is a very interesting point.
Yeah, let me also sort of, to defend this practice too, is sometimes you really do have a long-term plan.
Yep.
And that long-term plan might be the boss shows up and I can't fight that boss unless I have all of these cards in hand because I'm going to be committing them then. I don't want to commit them earlier. What I think the issue ends up being is if you start discarding things to hand size
Yep.
for no good reason, and then you probably should use them in some way. I can get a little afraid of my gun runs out of bullets. I need to have two guns in my hand to play over that old gun, or a crypt chill or something takes away something. So I don't want to just like wantonly throw cards away and then suddenly be like, oops,
Yep.
maybe I should have held on to one of these. But I think there's still like a middle ground here where upgrading into more things like, I don't know, ace in the hole, right?
Yeah.
Crazy good card, really, but it reads really boring. But it shows up in your hand, you play it. You don't really have to wait for like the big turn. You can, but you might as well just play it if you're otherwise going to discard something else. So,
Ace in the Hole, is that the action one, or is that the yeah? Okay, what's the flip token one?
the which one?
The one that like turns the negative into a positive. It's the rogue card.
Sure gamble.
Sure gamble. So I think this letting the cards rot is such an interesting way to put it too, because to me, like, letting a card rot is even not in the fact that it's like holding your guns back, but it's like if you end every scenario with the same card in your hand, that's a good way that you can be like, maybe this card should be something else, right? But then likewise as well, I think there's such an interesting lesson to learn with that Sure Gamble card as an example. And I've seen someone do this with the, I don't know the name of the card off the top of my head, but it's the one that does the Dream Parasite, the Nightmare Bauble in Survivor. Don't wait for the perfect time for these cards. Just use them, right? Like, you pass a bad test, like you're like, even just like a fight, it's just a fight. You just shot your gun, use your Sure Gamble, pass the test, right? Don't wait for like the thing that's going to like cause you to lose the game, because that might ever happen. And I think that's more of like the Phoenix Down problem that people have, waiting for like the perfect thing, as opposed to setting up a combo or just finding the right time, but don't find the perfect time. Because sometimes you might miss 3 right times and then never find the perfect time.
I think Sure Gamble can be used proactively, honestly.
Yep.
You just take the test and say, either I pass the test because I drew a 0, or I'm
or
going to
pass the test because
Sure
I've
Gamble.
100%.
Yeah. I'll just finish up by saying this was really inspired by, I have no idea if anyone's watched this or if it's out yet, but playing this 3-player Scarlet Keys run with Pax and Phylian, where I'm running a couple of copies of Contemplative in my deck, and it's a really good card to throw at skill tests to people who are in connecting locations. But when someone else is running Fingerprint Kit level 4, maybe you don't need the card anymore. In 3-player, if they're getting all of the clues and you just are like, I can commit this to you, and they're like, you don't need to.
Yeah.
Then there's never going to be a perfect moment, and it gets back to what you're saying about like, maybe this should be a different card now.
Yeah, maybe
it had
is
its purpose early.
Yeah, and the decks have moved past it for sure.
Yep.
All right, let's go to my last habit that I want to break, and this one hurt for me to come up. This was the one that I didn't have right away, but I think I had to look inward, and I think I had to give myself some honest criticism for my decks, and that's not utilizing all forms of action compression. My playstyle from the get-go, from the start of this, as Travis said, was low to the ground, right? Where I put down one asset and then I win the game, right? Like, I just like use that thing. I use my stats. I use the skill cards in my hand. I use the not skill cards in my hand to just like, I use the events to just like push forward. There was a joke for the longest time that my play areas would be barren, and it's changed, right? Like, I started to do more asset heavy decks. Now that I'm like, I can build decks that are like crazy on assets, but my philosophy on winning the game has stayed similarly through this, which is the idea of, I will win the game by grinding the game to dust. Like, I will just like take enough actions or compress my clues or compress my damage to win. But if you notice, in all of the campaigns that I play, I don't do movement compression that much. You'll notice that I do a lot of just like moving normally, like a normal human. I am that which people safeguard onto. I am never that which safeguards, right? So it's like one of those things that I feel like I am leaving a lot on the table by not going into action compression that's beyond just traditional thing. Other things like this are just like ways for me to like compress my money. So like I never play. You'll actually notice this as well. It's pretty common. You have to like convince me to play stick to the plan and ever vigilant. I don't do that stuff because I live in a world where I'm like, I need to have everything in my hand for this to work perfectly, where I could just like do it with one card and not have to build a combo. But I think even then, I'm losing some form of action compression that is available in the game and I'm not taking advantage of. I do love Ever Vigilant 4, by the way, because other people can use it and there's stuff that comes there. You'll also see it when, if you look back, I was not high on motivational speech because it's compression, it's an emergency cache and an action to play, right? But I need to have an ally in my hand, or I need to assume someone else has an ally in their hand. And that wasn't really what I wanted to do with my style. But I think, realistically, if I want to actually get better, I need to find the right form of action compression in this deck, and I need to also start utilizing the forms of action compression that I am not using. Like, the movement one is especially crazy, like that I've just like am never doing that. The only time I actually play Pathfinder is in Ursula. That's the only time I play Pathfinder. For everyone else, I'm like, it's not worth it, which is crazy, I imagine, to a lot of people to hear that, but that's just my way, and it's just how I am.
Did you
because
play it in Amanda?
I don't think I did. Maybe I did it as a one-of. I played it as a one-of. But like,
you have the shortcuts at least to cycle through.
Yeah, like I'll play shortcuts because they're free. They don't cost anything. But like when I play Pathfinder, my head, same with Safeguard. So this is like what happens in my head. I'm like, that's a reason, those resources in action to play it. It's not worth it. That's what my head says, right? Because I'm like, how many movements am I going to get out of this? If I see it on turn 1 to 5, that's great. If I see it on turn 6 to 10, it's literally garbage and wasted space. But that goes to the previous thing we were just talking about. Cards have multiple uses. Why can't I just play those for when I do hit them? Maybe use them for skill icons if I don't hit them, or for other things. They can be cards that I discard if I deem them as garbage, or are they actually bad? Am I just like not utilizing all forms of action compression?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let me also submit that other kinds of action compression isn't just action compression, but they maybe allow you to do things on a turn that you otherwise wouldn't be able to do. Safeguard is kind of one of these, right? It's not just +1 action. It's, can I get moved out of this location when it's not my turn?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And sometimes that matters. I think a lot of cards that do this sort of thing, I mean, Pathfinder is just an extra action on your turn, but a lot of cards that do this have some other niche benefit that when you start to see, okay, this is the deck that actually wants this, then it makes a lot of sense. Obviously, upgraded Safeguard is really great for fighters because it allows you to engage an enemy before the Seeker, maybe, who moved in there first. So you're getting something that's maybe even an extra action there. It's like it's saving you an engage.
Yep.
It's saving you having to sequence your turns in some other awkward way. So I think that's interesting to talk about. You mentioned motivational speech, right? So I think there's like 3 interesting, maybe 4, like cards of comparison for these. There's Uncage the Soul, right? Motivational speech, and then something like Burn the Midnight Oil versus, I don't know, Sneak By maybe, versus maybe Clean Them Out as one that like no one plays unless it's very event focused deck like Nathaniel or maybe Marion. So all of these give you extra resources in some way, but they do it with different conditions, right? Burning Midnight Oil, you love, as probably everyone should, because you can always use it. You don't need anything else on the table. And the 2 resources can be used for anything. Sneak By is a little bit worse because it requires you to evade an enemy, but still really good icons, nice card. And then the other 2 require something else in your hand. They give you more, right? They give you 1 more resource, sort of. It's a discount. I think the spell one is interesting because usually the density of spells in your deck for those decks are is much higher, right? And motivational speech is a bit harder because you might not have that many allies. You only have 1 ally slot. However, you can use it on other people, so that's good too. I just think there may be a lot of different decks here, and if you don't play an expensive ally deck, then you don't need motivational speech.
Yeah.
But it should be there as an option.
Yeah, and Uncage the Soul is a good example too, because I only played Uncage the Soul back in the day because you had to, right? Now there's enough resource generation that you don't have to, but you compare that to the upgraded Uncage the Soul, which I love, because that's just another copy of your spell, right? But like, I think you really hit the nail on the head where Burning the Midnight Oil I love because it doesn't require anything, and these other things like require situations to be in, right? That's why I love Shortcut over Safeguard, because I don't need to like have someone else move with me, right? Because maybe like in my head I see Safeguard and I'm like, yeah, but like what if like I'm by myself? Because I sometimes often go off by myself, right? But I think maybe I need to like start trying to, because I look at Safeguard and all these cards, like I'm like, that belongs in Carson Sinclair, and that's where like I know it's best. And then I have a hard time finding other spaces for it because I know it's good. I've seen people play it being good, but I never feel like when I play it, it is good. And I think it's because I'm like covering my eyes and being like, no, it works. My plan works, but maybe my plan could be better if I embrace some of these other things. Because think how many basic investigate actions I could take if I never moved. Someone else moved for me, yeah.
I almost feel like you're almost like playing a true solo deck sometimes, right? It's like using someone else's deck to really support yours. I think you've said this a long time. Like, I don't want someone else to solve my problem, right? Why should I budget someone else moving to fix whatever tempo problem I have in my deck? But maybe sometimes it's not a problem. You're just taking extra advantage because someone else can move for me.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. All right. Well, that was fun. I highly suggest everyone also do the same. Try to figure out what your bad habits are and see what you could maybe do to approach them. How can you break those bad habits? Because I'm gonna try to play Safeguard. Maybe I probably won't. But you know what? I'm too far gone. I'm an Arkham boomer. I can be stuck in my ways. Maybe for the next patron game day, I'll bring a Safeguard deck, and that's not Carson Sinclair. I have to say that as well, because that's the easy way out of that.
Did I play it in Carolyn?
I don't know.
Maybe you had it in York at some point.
No, I never put it. I did not put it in the York deck. I don't think.
Okay, then I had it. I had the Safeguard.
Yeah, no, because I would never. But I mean,
I don't know why I would want it.
In all fairness, well, I mean, you probably took it because someone had to take it. Probably in the back of your mind, you're like, this card's like good. It saves action. One of us should be playing it. But like, it's interesting because I feel like as the fighter, I had more downtime, so it made sense for you to have it there. But at the same time, it's nice to have the ability as the Clover to move with the fighter protecting you. It's very interesting. It's a very interesting thing to talk about, but that goes beyond the scope of this video. Maybe we'll talk about it in a podcast.
In my mind, I also thought about, like, there are some sticking points in scenarios where it's like, if we both can get out of a location before the round ends, that's better than you being left behind. Yeah. Especially in those, like, Doom of Etsley or Depths of Yoth issue, right?
Yeah, for sure. Sweet. All right, well, thanks for joining me for this, Daniel, and thank you to everyone who watched this video. I hope you enjoyed it. We'll be back for another list video next week as the time, changes, the Earth rotates, all that stuff. List videos will happen again. In the meantime, thanks for watching, everybody. Have a good one, and as always, GG's.